Shaykh Hamza, my question is about spirituality and food. And the Quran talks a lot about eating what's halal, but that's usually coupled with the word tayyib. So,
Yeah.
halal being what's legal. And maybe can you comment on what you feel tayyib would sort of mean in our current sort of culture? And then also, what do you feel is the spiritual effect of consuming artificial foods like high fructose corn syrup and all these sort of processed things that are added to foods and packaged? What's the spiritual effect of eating artificial food, and how, can you sort of comment on the idea of tayyib?
Just to use another tradition, in some traditional Buddhism, the chef in the monastery had to be enlightened. Like, they didn't let just anybody into the kitchen. And in the Islamic tradition, there's a whole tradition about food preparation and the intention of the cook. And so that my teachers, the people that cooked, always made the intention that the food was a healing. One of the things that's really interesting in our culture, when you go to, they don't teach grammar anymore, so people use transitive verbs as intransitive verbs. But when you go to a restaurant, they say enjoy, right? Enjoy is, I guess you could make it intransitive, but you usually enjoy something. But here it means the food, so, but they just say enjoy. In traditional cultures, they never would say something like that. They would say like salud, with health. In the Arabic culture, they say bis-sahwa wal-afiyah, with health and well-being, which reminds us of the purpose of the food. It's not to enjoy. Enjoyment is part of it. I mean, it's wonderful that food is so enjoyable, but that's not the reason why you're actually eating it. That's why the glutton eats. But somebody who's serious about maintaining their health, they eat for health. And we're literally digging our graves with our teeth. I mean, in our culture, we are literally killing ourselves with the food we eat. And so I would say that all traditional peoples ate with just a knowledge of what food was about. And this is why the Kishrat tradition, the halal tradition, that you have to, there's a whole, Native Americans took permission in many of their traditions. They took permission from the animal in the Islamic tradition, the Jewish tradition. There is actual, you have to do it in a way, in our tradition, you're not allowed to kill an animal in front of another animal. And if you look, I mean, it's arguable that it's unethical to eat meat today, unless you're on a farm where you're and there was an interesting article about a man who decided for 1 year, I didn't see the film, but he did a documentary where he only ate what he killed for 1 year. And when he would buy the sheep, one of the sheep farmers told him, he said, I think I'm going to call that, Zeke. And he said, no, don't name them, because you'll get attached to them. But he chose to name them. What he said was, the thing that struck him most was the gratitude he felt to the animal when he ate it. And in our tradition, there's a belief that the animal wants to be energy for good deeds. Because by becoming part of a righteous person, it's elevated in its state from an animal that doesn't have free will, that only behaves according to its nature, to part of a being with free will. And the animal hates to be used for foulness or for misdeeds. And so that whole cosmology, which might sound romantic, but it was real. People, and I met people that still live like this, and my wife does this. She cooks with that intention. If I cook with that intention. When I serve food, I cook with that intention. I'll just tell you one quick story. I have a friend of mine who's a connoisseur of tea, and he'll only drink certain teas. And in England, PG Tips is like the worst tea. And he went to a friend of mine's house, and I know both of them. And it was tea time, and the English take this very seriously. And so he only had PG Tips in the house. And so he said, God, he's going to know this is horrible tea. So he goes in and he told me that he made a prayer over the tea. And he said, oh God, make this delightful for my friend. And he went in and he poured the tea and he told me that he drank and he said, you know, that's the best cup of tea I think I've ever had. And, you know, there's a reality to these things. We don't realize just the power of intention. You know, niyya in Arabic, which means intention, also means seed. It's the seed of the thing, why you do so. And so many of us do things without intention. There's no intentionality. And intention, I know in your tradition, in our tradition, intention is everything. Why you're doing something. And constantly asking yourself, why am I doing this? To check our intentions.
I disavow that we're not going to clap thing. I want to... that applause was also for the question.
That was a good question.
Because, at least, I don't want to deflect too much, but from a Jewish tradition, this is something we struggle with a great deal. Because the laws of kashrut were written, 1,000 years ago and more. And they were designed to be more humane and to make the exact connections that you're talking about. And the world in which we live has advanced to the point that one needs a variance from the USDA because it's not as advanced, and we lost something in that.
Yeah.
There was a speaker who came just a couple of years ago. His name was Rabbi Arthur Waskow, and he's sort of the front of something we call the eco-kashrut movement. And Arthur's perspective is, if you're saying a blessing over wine that was made with grapes, that was sprayed with pesticides, that made the people who made them ill, it's not holy. And if you take organic wine that's been, that's been made in the purest way and pour it into a styrofoam cup, it's not kosher. And what he means by that is that the word used to mean something.
Right.
It meant fit. And the purpose of the sharing of food, the enjoyment wasn't in the consumption and how much can we pump into it with corn syrup, but rather the meal and the story of your friend praying over his tea.
Yeah.
That was what it was intended to be.
Yeah.